Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this auspicious occasion as we celebrate the 244th birthday of the U.S. Army. Happy birthday. Now, we have several dignitaries with us today. I'm going to ask that you hold your applause until the end, but we are honored and very thankful to have with us today Calvin Collins with the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, Representative Mark Abraham, Shelley Mayo with the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, Mark Eckert, City Council, Senator Ronnie Johns, Lucas Verrett with Congressman Clay Higgins' office, and Vanessa Melanson with the Louisiana Veterans Affairs Office. And I just saw that John DeRosier, our Calcasieu Parish DA, has joined us. How about a round of applause for all of them joining us today? We also have members of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission that are with us today. So many that I know we want to get to this cake in a moment, but I would invite all of our members of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission at this time to please stand and be recognized. Thank you all for your service. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, for our opening prayer, I would like to invite Chaplain Roger Pete. Chaplain Pete.
Can we stand? And if you're covered, please uncover. Almighty God, our Supreme Commander, on this 244th anniversary of the birth of this nation's Army, we humbly come before you. There is so much for us to be thankful for that we could never mention them all. We are thankful for this great nation and the men and women that gave everything for us to enjoy the freedom we have today. We thank you that you are just as mindful of us today as you were 244 years ago. We ask that you bless all of our veterans today. I want to just mention, Lord, and ask you to remember those that are deployed and in harm's way, that you be their defender, their protector, their shroud about them. I pray for their families and the families that represent all of the POWs and MIAs, that you encourage them as we make every endeavor to bring them home. I pray that you will bless this nation, its leaders, and the leaders that make crucial decisions. This we pray in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. And I'll invite all of us to remain standing. At this time, I invite Miss Kyla Saunier to honor us with the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, once so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Ms. Saunier. And I'll invite us all to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Would Sergeant Brian Moody please honor us with the Pledge of Allegiance? Sergeant Moody, thank you for joining us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone, thank you so much. You may be seated. I need to have Sergeant Moody speak for me at City Council meetings, I think. Very well done, sir. Welcome, and thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for a formal welcome, I'd like to introduce Charles Dalgleish, President of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission. Charles, thank you for joining us.
At this time, I'd like to welcome everyone here today that's come to help us celebrate the 244th birthday of the United States Army. Also want to thank Mayor Nic Hunter and the commander of the 32nd Hospital Center, Colonel Lee Burnett, for joining us too today. Since its official establishment on June 14th, 1775, more than a year before the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Army has played a vital role in the growth and development of this great nation. The Army draws its strength from both long-standing military traditions and professional standards. It won the new republic's independence after a grueling 8-year struggle against Great Britain. At times, the Army proved to be the only symbol of nationhood around which the patriots could rally. 244 years ago, the Continental Congress authorized the formation of the Continental Army, consisting of 6 light infantry companies. This is the foundation of our mighty Army that we have today. Today, as we celebrate the 244th birthday with our active duty brothers in arms from Fort Polk, we also remember the contribution and the sacrifices of all the soldiers that have come before us and contributed to make this the greatest army in the world. We especially recognize the ultimate sacrifice and also the POWs and MIAs, which are represented by the empty table to my left here. And if you're interested, please read the plaque on the symbolism on the table. But we recognize the sacrifice that our brothers in arms have made to protect and provide us with the freedoms that we have today in the greatest country in the world. Thank you, and I turn this back over to Mayor Hunter.
Thank you, Charles. Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome on behalf of the City of Lake Charles. When Fort Polk reached out to us and asked if we'd be willing to partner on a birthday celebration for the United States Army, we said absolutely, but we're not just going to have some punch and some cake. We're going to do it in Lake Charles fashion, and that's what happened here today. Fort Polk and Southwest Louisiana have long-standing history, dating back to World War II, when it was established in 1941. Fort Polk trained thousands of soldiers via the Louisiana maneuvers. This massive training operation that involved Chenault, also here locally, was designed to test troops and practice their modernization and mechanizations. These extensive exercises led to the creation of 16 armored divisions after the war. Although the role and look of Fort Polk has changed throughout the years, our connection and level of support has not. We recognize that many soldiers and their families who call Fort Polk home also call Lake Charles and Southwest Louisiana home as well. For their commitment to our nation, we owe our brothers and sisters stationed at Fort Polk a strong partnership and a strong friendship. We owe them a destination just a short drive away that is welcoming and a place where they can look forward to visiting in their downtime. To all of those here from Fort Polk today, on behalf of the City of Lake Charles, the Lake Charles City Council, and the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, we thank you for your service, and we extend an open invitation for you to call Lake Charles your home. Thank you. This time, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to invite Colonel Lee Burnett to say a few words on behalf of Fort Polk. Colonel Lee Burnett joins us today. He is the commander of the 32nd Hospital Center at Fort Polk. Colonel Burnett.
Thank you to Mayor Hunter, to the Armed Forces Commission, to all the fellow veterans that are here today. It means a lot. I don't really have any prepared statements, but I do want to relay a story. Sergeant Major, just a few minutes before we had to leave to come down here, she got a phone call from a spouse who was having some real challenges. An active duty Army spouse. And she knew she needed to come down here so it could be here on time, bring us a cake, a saber, and be here with everybody. But she put that aside. And the reason she did is because that's what we do in the Army. That's what we do anywhere in the military. When our brothers or our sisters in arms or their families need help and they reach out, we're there for them. I don't think you can say that about most jobs. That's why the Army is so much more than a job. It's more than a profession. It's really a family, and it's a way of life. So it means a lot to be here today to share this birthday with the mayor, the commission, and everybody here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colonel. At this time, we will have a reading of the Continental Congress resolution establishing the U.S. Army, honoring us with his vocal talents. For this occasion is City Council President Mark Eckerd, a U.S. Army veteran.
Thank you, Mayor. Even though I have this head of gray hair, I was not around 244 years ago. But it was 41 years ago when I raised that right hand and enlisted in the Army as that Private E1 slick sleeve that I know my fellow soldiers over here are very familiar with. The establishment of the Continental Army was on June 14, 1775. The Continental Congress passed the following resolution, and I quote, "Resolved that 6 companies of expert riflemen be immediately raised in Pennsylvania, 2 in Maryland, and 2 in Virginia, and that each company, as soon as completed, shall march and join the Army near Boston to be there employed as light infantry under the command of the chief officer in that Army," end quote. And ladies and gentlemen, thus with that resolution was formed, the Continental Congress adopted the New England Army of Observation, making it a Continental Army, a united colonial fighting force that could represent all 13 colonies with the addition of the troops from the 3 middle colonies. The Continental Army thus became America's first national institution. Hoorah.
Before we go to the next part of the presentation, I want to share a story with you as well. I want you to know that I received permission from Charles Dalglish to wear this Army tie. And I'm going to tell you why I asked for permission. Because I have a father-in-law who several months ago sent me a box full of ties. Apparently he collected ties over his 30 or 40 years as a professional. And I picked out of about 200 ties, about 10 which I thought were acceptable to wear. One tie I really particularly appreciated. It was navy blue and it had some beautiful insignias on it. And I remember wearing it one morning to City Hall, and I'm going to tell you about how I almost had my first scandal as mayor of Lake Charles. I was wearing this tie that I really thought was pretty spectacular. We had a meeting with a couple of gentlemen, and after the meeting, one of the gentlemen got up and he said, "Thank you, and I just want to say thank you for your service." And I said, "Well, you know, as mayor, that's my duty to provide service. It's an honor to be mayor." He said, "No, I'm saying thank you for your service. Obviously, you're wearing the tie, and I want to say thank you for your service." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're wearing a Navy officer's tie." He said, "Only Navy officers wear that tie." So I had to think very quickly on my feet, and I said, "Oh, yes, well, I'm wearing this in honor of my father-in-law." And so in any case, I am wearing an Army tie today, but I want it to be known that I did receive permission from an Army veteran. So thank you, Charles, for that permission. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would like to invite members of the East Ridge Baptist Church Choir, led by Linda Monte. They are with us today, and they are going to lead us in the first verse, chorus, and refrain of the Army song. I invite members of the U.S. Army to stand during the song, and all other guests, please feel free to join along. I believe many of you have copies of the lyrics.
Good afternoon, Army families. So when we say Army, when you say Army, you say hooah. Can you say that? All right, ready, go. Army. Hooah. All right. So our sisters in armed forces, we don't want to keep you out of the dark, but you are part of our Army family for today. And pretty good, we all look good for 244 years old, right? Okay. So traditionally, whenever we cut a cake, whether it's Army, Air Force, Navy, we always have our most senior ranking person, soldier, service, sailor, Marine Corps, up to cut the cake, and our most junior soldier or the youngest soldier up to join us in cutting the cake ceremony. And today we use the NCO sword to cut the cake, because as NCOs, us non-commissioned officers, we're considered the backbone of the Army. Hooah! And then we cut to the chase, which basically you all are here for the cake. So to cut to the chase, let's cut the cake. And we have the most senior ranking soldier. We have Colonel Burnett would like to join us, the mayor, and all our commissioners up here to join us the cake cutting ceremony. And our most junior, youngest soldier, PFC Manuel.
All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that the first piece of cake is actually going to someone very special that's with us today. I am honored that we have Miss Irma Darfin of Iota with us today. Now, a shy young girl from South Louisiana never thought that she'd make so many friends or travel so far from home and perform a role in World War II. Irma Boulay Darfin of Iota said, "My sisters and sisters-in-law talked me into being a nurse. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got into nursing. I'm glad I did. I enjoyed it. I made a lot of friends, which surprised me because I was just a timid girl from Crowley." Darfin was 17 when World War II started. And today, at 95, she easily recalls where she was when the war began. "I was playing cards at a friend's house after dinner when we found out," Darfin said. "That's how long it took information to get over," she continued. "I went to nursing school in Port Arthur, Texas, and some of my friends who had finished school were already at Camp Claiborne training, and they wanted me to go with them. When I got there, we learned basic training like marching and calisthenics. Among her friends were fellow Army nurses Helen Stevens from Des Allemands and Florence Faye Armstrong and Eunice Scheck-Snyder, both from Texas. Darfin and the other nurses volunteered for the 127th General Hospital the John Seeley Hospital in Galveston, Texas. And in August of 1943, the nurses all traveled to Fort Devon, Massachusetts for more training after their train did not arrive in time to catch a ship across the Atlantic. In October 1943, Darphin and her fellow nurses boarded the USS Mauretania at New York, bound for England. The ship was headed to the war zone with troops, doctors, and nurses on board. The ship was built to transport 1,000 people, and there were 10,000 people on it, Darphin said. We slept triple-decker and even on the floors. We played cards, had mass, and ate 2 meals a day. A German submarine tried to come after the ship on the way. We zigzagged to get away and went near the Azores Islands. A British boat and plane kept us safe. Darphin said the voyage took 9 days and the ship arrived at Liverpool, England to unload its passengers. A train then took the nurses to Lytham, Bishop's Castle near Taunton. At Lytham, Bishop's Castle, a hospital consisting of 45 huts and a mess hall was established. We didn't treat any injured soldiers there, Darphin said. At that time, we were treating soldiers in training, stabilizing them, and treating those going into combat. In May 1944, the hospital was turned over to another unit, and those in Darphin's unit moved to a tent city near Stonehenge. We were there for D-Day, and our activity was very restricted, she said. We marched nearby as planes flew over, getting ready for D-Day. The D-Day Normandy landings took place on June 6, and in late July, the unit was moved across the English Channel to Utah Beach, one of the places where Allied forces landed on D-Day. We were transported there on an Indian boat, Darphin said. They served us dinner on tables with white tablecloths, but then we had to climb down a rope ladder to a Higgins boat to get to the beach. The GIs there were excited to see American women, too, she added. Darphin said they spent the first night in Normandy in a bombed-out church before traveling to Rennes, France. The Germans were only about 10 to 15 miles away, but our anti-aircraft did the trick. The saddest part of that trip to Rennes was the families looking through bombed buildings, looking for what was left. When the unit arrived at the hospital, everything at the hospital had to be cleaned and thrown out. The Germans had been there, Darphin said. We had to throw everything, even the Band-Aids, as bad as we needed them, and the hospital opened 10 days after we got there. Fighting was going on near the hospital, and the nurses were escorted from their sleeping quarters at a convent to the hospital for their shifts. The nurses treated patients that were on board a boat that had been bombed. In January of 1945, the unit was transferred to Nancy, France, and the hospitals they were stationed at, as well as several other buildings nearby, were treating patients from the Battle of the Bulge. We gave candy to the children as we walked through town to the hospital. One of the nurses gave a child a toothbrush, and the child told her it was the first toothbrush he had ever had. In their spare time, Darphin said they played baseball. In a nod to the unit's Texas roots, a sign with a Texas Longhorn was placed in front of the building. We had a lot of people come to us with their cows and horses, thinking we were veterinarians, Darphin said. By the spring, the tide of the war had taken a sharp turn, and many prisoners of war were being liberated from POW camps. Some of the soldiers were treated at hospitals where Darphin was stationed, and the soldiers were treated and stabilized before being shipped back stateside. The unit left Nancy for Marseille, France, when the war ended in September 1945. There, the nurses and other hospital staff had to be immunized and pass physicals before heading back home. I left and came home on almost the same day, Darphin said. She kept up with her 3 closest friends from her time in service. All have since passed on. Once she was back stateside, Darphin lived in Texas for a short time before moving back to Louisiana and marrying George Darphin of Jennings, who served in the Air Corps during the war. She took a job with the public health office in Jennings, and she and her husband had 4 children. After her children were grown, Darphin went back to work at the state school in Iota, now called the Ark of Acadiana. She eventually retired, and about 9 years ago, she became involved in the Women Veterans of Louisiana organization. The group is comprised of women from all branches of service and those who have served since World War II. There are 2 other World War II nurses in the organization, and they both reside in Baton Rouge. As a member of the group, Darfin has traveled to Washington, D.C. to visit the World War II Memorial, to France, where the French resistance celebrated the anniversary of D-Day, and most recently to Hawaii to tour the USS Arizona Memorial. Darfin still has her uniform, pins for service, including 2 battle stars and a European theater of operations, many black and white photos of her time overseas, and her yearbook from the 127th General Hospital. She also has a lifetime of memories. I've had a good life, Darfin said. I'm glad I joined the Army. It helped develop me. So ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge and thank all of our Army veterans today. But at this time, I'd like to invite us to offer a special round of applause for a young woman that's sitting in the front row, Miss Irma Darfin. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Darfin, we thank you and your family for being with us today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thanks to our sponsors for their generous support. I appreciate these businesses and organizations for always being ready to support city events and events from the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission. Please hold your applause until the end. Today was made possible by Avail Hospital, Christus Health U.S. Family Health Plan, Pepsi, Keelan Construction, Manchac, Suddenlink by Altice, Ferrara, Acadian Ambulance, Johnson Funeral Home, Calcasieu Refining, Attakapaw, and American Legion Post 244. Thank you all to your sponsorships. I especially would like to thank again the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, all of these wonderful events we have here in Southwest Louisiana. And I'm going to say Southwest Louisiana because it's really not just Lake Charles. We have members of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission from all over the parish, and I don't know another community in the world that appreciates our veterans like Southwest Louisiana. Now, because of these sponsors, we have enough money left over. We kind of want to announce something special. We realized, Colonel Burnett and Sergeant Major Kiyoshi, we have a beautiful Veterans Memorial Park, perhaps one of the most beautiful in the state. But there is no acknowledgement of the connection between Fort Polk and the city of Lake Charles at our Veterans Memorial Park. So with a little bit of money left over and probably a few extra dollars we'll be able to scrape up, we're going to task the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission with coming up with some acknowledgement of the connection between Fort Polk and the city of Lake Charles and its importance, and we're going to honor Fort Polk at our Veterans Park on the lakefront. And yes, thank you. So again, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, that concludes our ceremony. Please hang around for some fellowship and friendship, and I invite all of you to remember that the Lake Charles Community Band will be right here at this spot at 7 p.m. for their Catch a Concert series. And what is this saying that the U.S. Army says? Hooah! All right. Thank you.